When I was a kid, I was playing with my dad at a park. Suddenly, I tripped over a rock and fell down. As I hit the ground, a piece of broken glass pierced into my foot. It hurt so much that I couldn't help but cry a lot. The glass was quite big and went deep into my skin, making me bleed a lot. My dad, seeing me in pain, got really worried. He carefully pulled out the glass from my leg and then hurried me to the nearest hospital. I kept crying from the pain all the way to the hospital. When we got there, I continued sobbing in the waiting room. Then, a nurse came over to me. She spoke kindly, telling me that the doctor would help me feel better soon. She gave me a strawberry lollipop, which made me feel a little better. I remember feeling relieved when I saw her friendly smile. That moment made me want to become a nurse when I grew up. After finishing high school, I went to nursing school and successfully graduated after 3 years. Finally, I became a nurse. At first, the job seemed overwhelming, but as time passed, I got used to it and felt happy and satisfied every day. As I went about my work, everything seemed fine, but there was a nagging worry in the back of my mind. My father had started gambling. He was into horse racing, slots, poker, you name it. Some days he was cheerful, other days he seemed really down and gloomy. My mom often asked him anxiously if we were doing okay financially, and he always brushed it off confidently, saying, "Yeah, we're totally fine." But one evening during dinner, he dropped a bombshell. He had racked up a huge debt from gambling losses, around $80,000. My mom and I were furious, but we had no choice but to help him pay it off. We didn't want debt collectors showing up at our doorstep, so we all pitched in to repay the debt. To make extra money, I took on night shifts at work. Day after day, the exhaustion piled up, and I found myself barely functioning from lack of sleep. Then one day after a night shift, something unexpected happened on the bus ride home. Sitting in front of me was an old man, accompanied by what seemed to be his son. Suddenly, the old man complained of a headache and then collapsed, unconscious. The son panicked, trying to support his father as best as he could. I immediately sprang into action, shouting for the driver to stop and calling 911. Given the symptoms, I suspected it might be a stroke, so I quickly organized the passengers to clear a back seat for the old man. I instructed the son to keep his father's head level and let him rest quietly until help arrived. After the ambulance took the old man and his son away, I hoped for the best, watching them drive off through the car window. 6 months passed since that incident. One day, my colleague Michelle asked if I was free that evening. Since I didn't have a night shift, I said yes. She then explained that she had a mixer with some doctors planned, but they were short one girl, and she begged me to come along. Michelle and I have become friends since we started working at the hospital together. Despite my initial shyness, she had always been outgoing and inclusive. I had never been to a mixer before and didn't know what to expect, so I initially refused her invitation. However, she persisted, and after some convincing, I agreed to go. After work, Michelle and I freshened up in the changing room. Michelle looked stunning as usual, putting extra effort into her appearance with a neat dress and high heels. In contrast, I felt underdressed in my cheap knit top and jeans. But Michelle assured me it was fine. When we arrived at the tavern where the mixer was being held, 2 of Michelle's nursing school friends and 4 doctors were already there. I felt nervous in the unfamiliar atmosphere. The male organizer enthusiastically suggested we start with introductions. They were all surgeons from the same hospital, which seemed prestigious. As each person introduced themselves, I grew increasingly anxious. When it was my turn, I nervously mumbled, "I'm Mary Smith, nice to meet you," feeling out of place among the confident and accomplished group. As I nervously finished introducing myself, Matthew, seated at the end, suddenly made a hurtful comment, calling me ugly. Shocked and hurt, I couldn't believe what I had just heard. To make matters worse, another doctor laughed at his remark, while Michelle, understandably angry, reprimanded him. The organizer, still laughing, tried to brush off Matthew's comment, But Matthew continued, saying he expected to see beautiful girls because they had been meeting only pretty ones at recent mixers. Other doctors joined in, agreeing and complaining about the lack of attractiveness in the women they met. Feeling deeply hurt and shaken, I struggled to hold back tears, my confidence shattered. As I trembled with anger and sadness, I looked down, trying to hide my emotions. Suddenly, a man from the back of the group stood up and approached our table, shouting for everyone to stop. His angry outburst surprised everyone. I felt a sense of familiarity as I looked at his face, realizing I had seen him before. With determination, he defended me, revealing that I was the kind-hearted person who had helped his father when he collapsed on the bus. Matthew and the other doctors were taken aback by his intervention, but the man didn't back down. As the realization dawned on me, I remembered the incident from 6 months ago. The man standing before us was the same person who had been with his father on that fateful day. In a dramatic gesture, he slammed a wad of cash on the table and urged me to leave with him, away from the toxic environment. Confused by the sudden turn of events, I hesitated, unsure of what to do next. As I grabbed my bag and followed the man out of the tavern, he cast a threatening glare back at the doctors. Ignoring their mocking remarks, we stepped outside. Another person, who seemed to be the man's friend, rushed out after us, reminding him that he had paid the bill and suggesting they catch up another time. The man apologized for the confusion, and his friend headed back inside. Feeling grateful for his intervention, I thanked him sincerely for his help. He explained that he had only attended the mixer to balance out the numbers and had not anticipated the unpleasant behavior of the others. He had recognized me from the incident 6 months ago when I had helped his father. Curious about his father's well-being, I asked how he was doing now. He expressed his gratitude, explaining that his father had improved significantly thanks to my assistance. He admitted that he had been too flustered that day to even ask for my name, but he had wanted to thank me ever since. After introducing myself as Mary, he handed me his business card, revealing that he was Douglas Thompson, the CEO of Space Corporation. Surprised by his status, I commented on his impressive position, but he humbly downplayed it. He then asked if I would be willing to meet his father sometime so he could express his gratitude in person. Despite his insistence, I declined the offer for thanks, feeling uncomfortable with the idea. After exchanging contact details, Douglas and I went our separate ways. Later, he invited me to dinner, and I agreed to meet him. When I arrived at the upscale restaurant, Douglas and his father were waiting for me. Douglas's father thanked me sincerely for my help 6 months ago, and I assured him it was no trouble at all. I was relieved to see that he looked well. Douglas's father then apologized for the rude behavior of the doctors from their hospital. Confused, I asked for clarification, and Douglas explained that he had overheard the doctor's conversation at the mixer. It turned out that they worked at his father's hospital and had a reputation for causing trouble by flirting with nurses and generating complaints. In light of their behavior at the mixer, they were given a serious warning. Grateful for their apology, I thanked them. We then discussed various topics, including the hospital. When I mentioned my frequent night shifts, Douglas expressed concern upon learning about my father's debts. He admitted that he had planned to become a doctor himself, but couldn't handle medical emergencies. However, he offered to pay off my father's debt as a gesture of gratitude for helping his father. Feeling overwhelmed by his generous offer, I hesitated. But then his father suggested that he would pay the debt with one condition: that I marry Douglas. Shocked by the proposal, I asked for clarification, and Douglas's father suggested that we date first and decide later. Douglas was clearly embarrassed by his father's suggestion. Although surprised, I found Douglas to be a kind-hearted person, so I agreed to start as friends and see where things led. Douglas was taken aback by my response, but he seemed pleased. After Douglas's father's proposal, Douglas and I began going out to eat frequently, bonding over our shared love for gourmet food and discovering our similarities as introverts with a strong sense of justice. As we grew closer, we started dating with marriage in mind. 6 months later, Douglas proposed to me, expressing his intention to take care of my father's debts himself. Touched by his gesture, I felt guilty about accepting his help. However, Douglas reassured me that he was committed to taking care of me, and he insisted that I didn't need to worry about repaying him. Overwhelmed with gratitude, I cried tears of happiness and thanked him profusely. When I shared the news with my parents, they were overjoyed that the debts were paid off and that my marriage was settled. They expressed relief that there would be no more gambling, and they thanked me for my good fortune. Douglas's father was also pleased, admitting that he hadn't expected us to get married, but feeling that we were right for each other. With blessings from both families, we happily married and moved into our new home. We've been enjoying a blissful married life ever since. Meanwhile, the doctors from the mixer continued to display defiance towards authority, which eventually led to Douglas's father firing them. I believed it was well-deserved considering their behavior. Today, I continue to work hard as a nurse, feeling fulfilled in my role of helping others. My job is my calling, and I'm dedicated to making a difference in as many lives as possible. For my beloved family, I'll keep working hard and striving for excellence in my career.